come on up, please. If you could each stand behind the table with me, just sort of nicely organized for three of you to have a spot.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
So I am going to help everyone else. By the way, you all have a role here. In fact, you sort of have got the better of the positions because you get to do the activity. You have to pay attention and talk about it afterwards. And I'm going to ask the questions when this is done, so be ready. We're going to develop a little simulation of a professional bureaucracy. We're going to do the two things that a bureaucracy does: rationalize and formalize labor. We break down a complex task into little component parts that each of us can do, and then we put those components back together in a way that makes sense so that the outcome at the end is very regular, it's very standardized. And I hope you will begin to think to yourself, well, why would he ask us to do this when we're talking about schools and students and education? And as you come up with answers, hold them there, because I'm going to ask those questions of you in a couple of minutes. Everybody ready? Okay. So as bureaucracies work, I am going to teach each of you one task. It is your task only. You are not to get involved in the next task or the previous task. I'm going to help you become an expert at this task, and then you are going to perform it faithfully. Everybody on board with that? If you come up with a new idea as we get started, put it away. So we're going to create a bureaucracy that makes paper airplanes. Okay? So I'm going to show you each your step, and then we'll give it a practice run, and then we'll follow out the demonstration and see what it can teach us. So you're going to do that.
Okay.
Shall I show you again?
No.
Okay. Excuse me. We're going to do that. Okay?
Michael, can you show, I don't know if the angle they can see.
You've made paper airplanes, I think. So, step one, that. So that's sort of a little review there.
Yeah. You're
Okay.
indulging.
Step two, that. Step three,
Yep.
you have a fairly complex task as these things go. So there's that,
Okay.
followed by
Oh, no.
that. And this is why you have to be careful in the front row. I can't really guarantee the outcome here. I can only guarantee the input. So everybody's ready to go? So I'm going to provide the raw materials. You are thinking, okay, obviously this is some analogy to how schools work. Why are we doing this? And you're going to come up with some responses about that. And students out there, this is when your parents get pressed into service. You do not have to answer unless you're inclined to. Okay, ready? There you go. So far, so good.
Did we say anything?
You could say good morning, or, I couldn't find a parking space when I got here today,
I
or...
feel like Lucille Ball.
That's not bad.
Yeah. All right, this one's going to be a Boeing.
I hope that doesn't, okay.
New paper. Exciting.
So again, keep an eye on what's happening. Think about very specific kinds of things that you can relate to the experience that you've had in school, or that you think your children have had in school, or with other kinds of professional bureaucracies. Marion, you are taking this very seriously. It's excellent. So far, so good on the outcomes, I think.
Ooh. Ooh.
Impressive. There's an outcome you should pay attention to, I think. That's good to go. There are more students coming into the system here, so. Very important, we rationalize the labor, that is, we break it down into discrete tasks, and we learn them and we perform them very faithfully, because we figured out the very best way to do each of those tasks.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to take a fifth. It's kind of like healthcare.
And were you supposed to state something that would be a good idea? Or just pass the line?
Is this one of those new mercury bulbs? No. I think we'll
Thanks.
avoid it.
Thank you very much. Here are your prizes. Excuse me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Okay. So what happened there?
Yellow kids fly furthest.
The yellow kids fly the furthest. Okay. Sure.
Same process, different inputs, different results.
Right. Same process, different inputs, different results. Where's the problem in that system?
Didn't work for everything.
The processes didn't work for everything.
There was no problem solving together as a team.
Right, there's no problem solving, and that's one of the characteristics of a professional bureaucracy. Think about the sorts of training programs that teachers go through, right? We may learn that we ought to adapt, but we also learn very standard practices for how to achieve results with students. Very standard expectations about what results should be achieved at what point. Ken Robinson, I don't know if you've seen any of his talks, Ken Robinson's way of putting this is to say that the single most important fact about a student when she enters school is her date of manufacture. Meaning, your birthday determines a whole lot about what we're going to ask you to do tomorrow when you get here. Or whether we let you come tomorrow or a year from tomorrow, right? And why that would be when we know, as Skurtic says, human diversity is inevitable. It's not going to happen only once in a while when we don't expect it. It's going to happen in each and every single case. His answer to that is something he calls adhocracy, and we've sort of adopted that term here also, which is instead the sort of inverse of that bureaucratic system. A system that tries in a lot of ways, in the 9-term academic year is one of the ways, tries in a lot of ways to disrupt the system that's in place, to find ways as part of your daily engagement with students and with education and with ideas, to rethink what's going on, even when it doesn't seem to be going wrong. Sometimes, especially when it doesn't already seem to be going wrong. It shouldn't be only when something doesn't work that you reconsider what the possibilities are. So I think that the idea that different inputs, same processes, different results, that's a great summary of the difficulties faced by a professional bureaucracy. Where do we, in typical sort of traditional special education, find the problem when this is what we see? Where do we identify a problem very often?
The input.
Sorry?
The input.
The input, exactly. Right? So if we know, and I think with very good intentions, this is what often happens in schools. And this is schools at all levels, independent and public, from K to graduate school. We tend to take this approach, thinking that we've identified some norm that is in itself important and important for each person. We tend to develop processes that we think are the gold standard, the one best way to fill in the blank, right? The one best way to teach reading, the one best way to teach physics, the one best way to learn music, the one best way to play on the soccer field. And because we've taken that approach, we get very good at that one best way and very committed to that one best way. And when the inputs are different, what happens?
System breaks down.
The system breaks down, and Skurdik would say to you, one of two things can happen when we look at this in special education. A student can be squeezed into the system. That's do the best you can with the aid in your classroom. That's, well, I'll give you a little bit of extra time on the test, but this is what you have to do. That's, well, we didn't expect as much from you, so don't worry about the performance that didn't go the way you hoped. Or they can be squeezed out of the system, and that is substantially separate sorts of special education programs, where we create a new system that is just for you. The trouble from our point of view here is that system is just for you, and it has the side effect, the catastrophic side effect of saying you're a different kind of person altogether. We had to create another sort of education for you altogether, and we know that in almost every case when we make that distinction about human beings, it means you're a sort of second-class other kind of person. And lots of assumptions from funding to seriousness to the training of teachers and to the expectations for students are affected by that. The problem in that system is found within that individual, right? The problem gets identified as the input, right? We very rarely say, the system is the problem, let's throw the system away and start again. Let's in fact try not to have a system, but a set of principles that we can develop practices for 1 day or 10 days, or this student in particular, on the basis of. Instead we say, well, that student is broken. And I know that is a harsh way of putting it, but if you look at special education law, and you probably already have, you will know that that is exactly what it says, right? IDEA will tell you the problem is intrinsic to the individual. Right, we say things like basic psychological processes, well, we know where those happen, right? They don't happen in systems, they happen between my ears, or between your ears. And so when we want to identify the problem there, the problem is with the individual. We think here that that is the fundamental assumption that many schools get wrong. It's not an easy thing to do. So the corollary to this is coming up with new ways of doing things on the spot every day. Not that you don't go in with some expectation about what often works very well and what might, in 90% of cases, be the first place to start, but you're ready to say, okay, so I can see it's not working, let's innovate now. Let's not say, you need to change. Let's say, what else can we do about this? Let's sit down together, student, teacher, parent, resident counselor, expert in teaching music, and let's figure out what's the next thing to try. Skurdik's way of talking about this, and I'm sorry to mention him so much, but he's a brilliant guy that gets not enough attention, I think. His way of putting this is that ad hocracies come into being, these sort of innovative organizations come into being when the knowledge and skills for doing a thing are almost completely unknown. I think that's what education is, or at least ought to be. Here's why. Not because we don't have a place to start, not because we haven't taught reading to people in schools before, but because we haven't done it with this student or this particular group of students before this moment. When we try it out in this moment and it works well, let's continue in that direction. We try it out and it doesn't work well, let's immediately look for something else that we can do. Instead of the alternative, which is to pass that input along and say, well, I have a process, you just don't fit it, here, you try. So that's the first of the big ideas that relate to learning diversity, this idea of organizational structures being the real place that learning disabilities, we would prefer not to use the term learning disabilities get created. I think it's fundamentally important to believe that they get created by systems like schools, not that they exist intrinsically within, between the 2 ears of any one individual. I think that the consequences that follow from that change are phenomenal. So that's the first idea. We can talk about some more later. Thank you very much.